Physical games are dead. What remains is a shell of its former glory. So what happened? Funnily enough, we need to go back in time to the video game crash of 1983. Atari 2600 was the console of the second generation. The market was overflowed with bad games with box arts that misrepresented the content. The savior came from an unlikely place, Japan. Using their popular Famicom, they redesigned the console to be more like a VHS player. Instead of top-loading cartridge slot, you slide it from the front just like a videotape. Nintendo Entertainment System, abbreviated to NES, saved the video game industry and marked Nintendo as one of the biggest players in the video game console market. Games and consoles had their own unique roles. Games contained everything that is required for the game, and consoles had the hardware to play the contents of said games, just like a VHS tape and a player. Nintendo wasn't the company that defined the roles, but they sure reinforced it by designing NES to resemble a VHS player. Want to have more advanced graphics in your game? Nowadays, companies would release an updated or pro version of their consoles to boost the graphical fidelity of their games. But back then, the game cartridge itself saw new hardware put inside that enabled all kinds of fancy technology that could not be done with a stock console. But like all formats, cartridges were soon to be phased out with an upcoming format, compact disc. It's the 90s. Nintendo and Sega are in fierce competition with their latest 16-bit consoles, Super Nintendo Entertainment System and Mega Drive, known as Genesis in US. It was a very close competition, and Sega wanted the edge. Other competitors like NEC and Atari were closing in, and Sega had to respond. In response to Atari Jaguar, a supposed 64-bit console, Sega released Mega Drive 32X, a 32-bit add-on to the Mega Drive that improved its performance beyond the system's capabilities. In response to NEC PC Engine CD ROM, and yes, that's how it's supposed to be pronounced, the world's first console to utilize CD, Sega released Mega CD. Add-on to the Mega Drive that used CD instead of cartridge. This caused a slight problem. A cartridge can store save files, but a CD can't. Well, a CD can, but consoles did not have the capabilities to write to CDs. If anyone knows why, leave a comment down below as I couldn't find anything about this topic. So what does Sega do? Build a small internal memory to the CD unit to store save files, moving the saves from the game itself to the console. Once other consoles started to emerge using CD as their choice of format, games no longer stored save files. Come the 5th and 6th generation, save files were moved to a memory card, an external piece of hardware that specialized in storing save files and only save files. Video game cases now had memory card slots built in. Save file was moved from cartridge to consoles and finally to a memory card, becoming its own thing. So if you were going to a friend's house to play your game, instead of just taking the game with you, you now had to take the memory card as well. Physical games were slowly losing its functionalities. But that's not all. Using CDs meant the performance of games were now 100% reliant on the console. Games like Star Fox on SNES were possible due to the Super FX chip inside the cartridge. Now, physical games merely contain the game data and nothing more. It's a different story in the handheld space, as cartridges contained save files and although not as often as cartridge games in the 80s and 90s, contained special functionalities to expand the capabilities of the console. In this case, Bluetooth functionality was built into the Nintendo DS cartridge, allowing players to connect Bluetooth keyboard to type on. Save files remained on the cartridge up to Nintendo 3DS. Nintendo Switch does still use cartridges, but no longer saves on them since the role of the game and the console has drastically changed. 7th generation consoles saw a major shift in game and save data storage. Consoles now had large, built-in hard drives. You could still use memory cards for the Xbox 360, but it was phased out. For the Wii, Nintendo built in a small flash memory instead, with options to expand it using an SD card. Save files are now tied to your console, no longer easily detachable. the role of consoles were getting bigger. This is mid-2000, and having a single-purpose electronics device no longer made sense. Smartphones, capable of doing millions of things, were in people's pockets, and a $200 to $300 console that only plays games simply didn't make sense to consumers and companies. With internet connections, consoles gained the ability to download apps, watch movies, listen to music, and download games straight to the console. Games now offered updates, DLCs, and expansions, with some titles only offered as downloadable titles. Even if you owned a disc version of a game, you now had the option to install it to your console to improve the loading time, as hard drives are faster than discs. Some titles even used both the disk drive and the hard drive to improve the loading speed of assets as shown, only recommending to install the data disk to the hard drive and keep the play disk in the disk drive. Some of you may be wondering, what's a data disk and play disk? Games have become more ambitious over the years, and the need for bigger storage has always existed. It was one of the key reasons why companies jumped from cartridges to CDs. But even CDs weren't enough for some titles, so the data had to be split to multiple discs. But they were still independently playable. Come the 7th generation, that was no longer the case, as certain discs needed to be installed to the hard drive, with an option to install the play disc if desired. As we move from CD to DVD and to Blu-ray, multi-disc releases remained. It's now the 8th generation of consoles with PS4 and Xbox One. Game discs have lost all purpose. Now, every disc needs to be installed to a hard drive. It's simply a data delivery service. You still need to put a disc in the console to verify if you own the game or not, but that's it. Nothing more than a little plastic to verify ownership. It doesn't keep save files, it doesn't load data for the console to play, it doesn't even have any data to begin with. Some companies, rather than using multiple discs for their games, started to opt for downloads instead. Titles like Spyro Reignited Trilogy only contains the first game on the disc, but since the game needs to be installed, it downloads the rest of the game as an update. The company that took this practice way far is Activision. If you buy the latest Call of Duty, it contains pretty much no data other than the data that verifies that you own the game. It then downloads the entire game off the server. Physical games have lost all meaning. What's the point of buying a physical copy when you have to download the majority of the game from the internet? I'm personally gonna stick to physical games for the time being, but it's not looking too great. That's it for now. Bye.